Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Public Works Committee will come to order. We have on the general agenda 2 items. We have on the consent agenda 2 items. I am going to pull consent agenda item C2 for a brief review from staff and an opportunity to answer any questions from committee members or other council members. And without objection, Councilmember Montgomery has asked that on the general agenda we move G2 up ahead of G1. If there's no objection, we'll make that change. Is there a need to pull item C1 from consent for discussion? That's the Martin Luther King Corridor Streetscape Enhancement Project.
If not, I move approval.
Second.
All right, discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving item C1, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That is approved unanimously. C2, please.
Update on selection of architects for the Winston-Salem Lake Marina, Quarry, and Jamison Park projects.
And this is included in the materials package under C8 for the finance. Was there discussion in finance yesterday? All right.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
It was informational.
That's right. This is an informational item only, not a vote by the committee. Mr. Turner, would you brief the committee on the general status here?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. As you recall, we have a new protocol wherein we bring items that are contractual like this to committee for information first, and then we come back the next month and ask you for approval. We went through a selection process for professional consultants, primarily architects, to do the design work for 4 rec centers. Park projects. And they are Jamison Park, the Quarry, Winston Lake Park, and Salem Lake Park, using a process that looks at about 6 different criteria: experience, familiarity with the project, age of the company, the quality of the proposal, MWBE commitment, and distance from the site. We selected 3 firms for your consideration next month, and the details of the scoring system that each of the firms received is in your package. I'll be happy to go over any details you have about them.
Right. And have the various parties that have put in proposals been notified of their status?
We notify them after the council makes a decision as to who your preferred consultant is. Then if we have a breakdown in negotiations with that consultant who is the first choice, we move to the next, and we ask council to approve that, which you recently did. Well, yesterday the Finance Committee was asked to consider a firm that was the second choice because selection or consultation and conference with the primary firm broke down.
At this point, however, have the various parties been notified of their status in terms of what recommendations will be coming to them?
Only the firm that has been recommended. Only the firms that have been recommended.
Okay. Are you available to respond to questions of other firms?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Are there questions from committee members?
I mean, this is all public information. If somebody wants to go online, they can certainly see all of it.
So, and the details are included here about the scores and the basis for the scores for each firm making a proposal for each project.
Correct. Now, we did have a question from one of the firms about why they specifically did not receive a MWBE score. What I should explain for the committee's benefit is that the MWBE participation, good faith effort, is graded on a 1 or nothing scale, all or nothing scale. If you make a 10% or better commitment to the project for MWBE, or if you make a good faith effort, as indicated by the scoring sheet that we have that goes out with the RFP, you get 20% of your score. You get a full 100 points out of 500. If you do not do those things, then you do not get any points. So it's all or nothing, as I said. And the way we score it is you just have to demonstrate that 10% is being done, but it has to be done on an affidavit. So we had some firms who would indicate in their narrative that they were going to do a certain level of MWBE participation, or that they had a firm who they planned to use who we happen to know was an MWBE, but they did not fill out the affidavit, which meant they weren't committed to that per their proposal. We had one firm that indicated a 5 to 10% commitment to the MWBE on their affidavit, but because that was not 10%, but was a range of between 5 and 10, we could not give them credit for meeting the MWBE expectations of the project. So
And did you say a 20% or 20 points?
it's 20% of the overall score. It's 100 points out of 500.
Are there other questions from council members? Yes.
Just in terms of process, my understanding was that this time around, we used the criteria as a sort of a one-stop thing. It was the matrix came in, the scoring matrix came in, and that's what the decision was made on.
Correct.
Just a back and forth process with bidders.
There is no back and forth process with the bidders. They are actually proposers as opposed to bidders. We don't even get prices until after we have a selection approved by council.
Mr. Gimmer.
One question, particularly looking at the Winston Lake one. I know the MLA, they did the study. Did they do the study on that?
I believe they did the master plan.
Master
study.
plan.
Yes, sir.
And they did a couple other master plans for us, too.
I don't
Or
know,
was that the
Mr.
only one?
Raleigh may know, but I'm not aware.
They've done some smaller things. They did the Commercial Plaza design. I know they've done some other things for us.
Okay. I was just wondering in terms of just the fact that they had done that in the past, and I know they have to reply on this. So if we'd been using, just wondering if we'd been using the same scoring standard, if they would have received those contracts prior to, in terms of just looking at quality work and what we got. Does that, why, what sets up?
I have no idea how they would have scored on previous processes. We, staff in my area weren't really involved in that. That was done by Recreation. What I would tell you is that we did give credit for experience or knowledge of the project, and so if they had done a master plan for an area, they on all probability got the full maximum score for familiarity with the project.
Okay.
Are these projects the same type of work that a firm would be undertaking in a master plan design?
No, this is actual design work as opposed to visioning and master planning work.
And what are the kinds of differences in qualifications for the two different kinds of projects?
I'm probably going to need to let you talk to the city engineer, Mr. Presswood, to get specifics like that. So.
For these projects, we're specifically looking for firms to create the actual construction documents for these projects to go out to bid, which include the detailed plans and specifications that we use to instruct the bidders on what to construct for us.
And is that qualitatively different work from what's involved in designing a master plan?
Yeah, it's much more detailed oriented. And again, creating those construction documents is very important from our end, again, because we have to go through the low bid process. We need to have those items locked in place when we enter that contract, or it opens us up to having to do change orders later on.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Again, this is an informational item, and I understand from the process that you anticipate coming back to the committees next month with contract proposals.
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Then let's move to item G2, please.
Presentation on the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership proposed Liberty and Main Streetscape design.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Ms. McCullough will be doing these two general agenda items.
Good evening. Thank you. The Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership presented the plan that we have before you to us. It is in their effort to promote revitalization in downtown on Liberty Streets and Main Streets between Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and 5th Street. The plan that they've presented is looking at pedestrian scale ornamental lighting, additional street trees, decorative metal signal poles, combined with maintenance of existing features. They suggest, where feasible, that any future plans that are developed on those streets would have overhead utility lines to be relocated underground, and they've also looked at other elements to include pedestrian safety, such as curb bulb outs ADA ramp improvements, high visibility crosswalks, and pedestrian signals. When the plan was presented to the Department of Transportation, while we feel it is a very good plan, we thought it would be better to bring it for information only at this time, because we've engaged the services of another engineering firm to look at making Liberty and Main two-way as a result of the ramp selections made with the Business 40 project. And so we did not want to ask council to make a recommendation and to approve a plan that could possibly adversely affect future decisions on making Liberty and Main two-way, such as the bulb outs. The bulb outs, we're not sure how that may affect the roadway travel if we determine that making Liberty and Main two-way would be feasible. So we thought it would be better to present the plan for information at this time, have the other engineer complete their study, and once we've determined what's feasible on Liberty and Main, then we could come back working with the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership and Stimmel Engineering to revise the plan if necessary to bring back the streetscape plan for your consideration.
And I'm sorry, I should have referred to this as the as Liberty and Main streetscape plan as opposed to the Martin Luther King streetscape plan. That's
Yes,
just
sir.
is one end of it. This is an information item. Are there questions? Mr. Clark.
When will you have this other work done on Liberty
The
and Main? Two-way issue.
the two-way, the consultant is currently, we had a kickoff meeting today. They're working on their schedule, but the work is scheduled to be complete within the next 6 to 8 months.
And that's well ahead of the road.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Montgomery and Mr. McIntosh.
You said, so that's 6 to 8 months before they would be done with the engineering study on that?
With the study
With
to
the study.
determine the feasibility of Liberty and Main. There are other aspects to that study that they're working on. There's some public meetings that they need to have scheduled beforehand to get some information and feedback from the public. So,
And so what are they in terms of beyond the, I understand the community part of it, but I'm just trying to understand exactly what all will be entailed in that study for them in terms of looking.
I'm going to try to recall for you, but when the Business 40 options were presented, the Chamber and the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership listed off 5 items that they wanted the city to make sure that we consider as a part of the project, which included looking at making Liberty and Main two-way, looking at the impact to parking downtown, looking at the pedestrian level impacts, and I can't...
Cherry Marshall, the pedestrian level.
Yes, pedestrian level impacts on Cherry Marshall, and I can't
I
recall...
think signage, directional signage was another issue.
Traffic calming and on
And
first.
traffic
and
calming
second.
on first and
That's a
second,
big part
yes.
of it.
Those were the other items. So traffic calming and signage were the other 2. So those are the things that they're looking at, and so they've got to gather some additional data as far as traffic counts at some of the intersections that we did not already have information on, do some synchro runs to determine the level of traffic impacts, and coordinating with the downtown businesses and others if there are impacts to parking and things of that nature. So that's why it's taking between 6 to 8 months.
And who's doing this?
This is
Yeah.
Davenport.
Davenport. And so that's part of the whole scope that we engaged them on in this
That's
piece,
right.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Comment, 2 comments. One in the sense that when we look at this portion of downtown, once you cross over and you're coming back east down 6 and back up even at 7th, that you clearly see a change in the dynamics of the infrastructure that runs from that way all the way back up to Martin Luther King. And as you see the anticipation of additional things happening in and around the area, when we see what's going to take place just right there at the corner, at top with the new park that's coming along with other things that are in plans and work, I think it is incumbent upon us as we work in conjunction with this study to look at how we look at continuing to expand that streetscape along that area all the way up to Martin Luther King, And as I've stated in the past, and I say it again, not beyond this particular area, but when we're coming back on the other side at Innovation Quarter and the streetscape that has been done there, I really would like to see us in terms of looking at some type of plan, whether it's associated with new development or development or something that we do beyond that, but how we extend that streetscape on 3rd, 4th, and 5th Street back across to MLK, finding additional ways for us to tie in through the infrastructure, through the landscaping there, that area all the way back up to Martin Luther King. I support us looking at this area, and I think it's something very, very well for us to do. But I think it's also incumbent on us to look at those ways, because I think that helps in what we're talking about and helping to move some of these barriers. If we can connect those areas through the landscaping, through the lighting, I think that helps us in that process. And maybe it accompanies additional development or it comes before that, but I think it's something to look at as well.
Mr. McIntosh.
To piggyback on the connection idea we're talking about here, how come we're not extending this from 5th Street to 4th Street? Are there technical reasons why we're not carrying this through to 4th on Liberty and Main?
Christy Turner may be able to answer the question as to why they just focused on Liberty and Main, but this was just the plan that they presented to us at the time, and we didn't ask them to expand upon it. She's willing to come up and maybe talk about that.
Sure. Our client at the time was Art for Art's
And
Sake.
I'm sorry, if you would identify yourself.
Sure. Christy Turner with Stimmel Associates. We produced the streetscape plan for Art's Sake. While we were working on the plan for Artivity on the Green, it was decided that we need to look at the entire streetscape and just come up with a plan to say, you know, this is an important area that's been underutilized, underdeveloped for a long time. And it's sandwiched between the Arts District on Trade Street and Innovation Quarter, and there's a lot of apartments, lofts, and things like that coming up in that area, and we're trying to spur new development in that area. 5th Street was just the cutoff that we were given by our client at that time. I think south of there, between 5th and 4th, there's already been some improvements by neighbors or by the city as well, I'm not sure. But the streetscape is in much better shape south of 5th than it is north of 5th.
I guess I just want to be sure that we're going to connect, you know,
Right.
that we're not losing that and having a gap in there, because
Sure.
it makes a big difference, especially with the R.J. Reynolds building being repurposed. We
Sure.
want to encourage people to come down that way.
And based on your direction, we can certainly revise the plan if that's deemed necessary.
Another question while you're up. There's a gap. There are no trees in front of the factory loft building. Was that intentional? I'm sure that was. There's a reason. for that.
The Winston factory lost, they installed trees, so we didn't show what was existing.
This is just showing additional.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a question. Not too many years ago, there was a proposal to do bike lanes on Liberty Street. Has there been consideration of bike facilities as part of this project?
Bike facilities will be evaluated as a part of the Davenport project, so making accommodations for them. So that was the other reason why we didn't want to go ahead and adopt this plan, to see what those recommendations would be before we move forward.
All right, so that's not in here, but it'll be in what's looked at.
Yes, sir.
Question about Davenport study and then this layering this on top of that. Are they going to be sequential, or can some of that be done concurrently? Can we start doing have Christie and Stimmel be doing their work alongside Davenport, or we have to wait till Davenport's done before we then start on this part?
The only reason that we recommended waiting had a lot to do with the road configuration and structure. So because Davenport is looking at the feasibility of making Liberty and Main two-way and the road widths, and we don't know what that impact would be to the actual roadway and the intersections, that was why we were asking that we wait to have a formal plan to be adopted by you.
Thank you. Anything else on this? All right, this is an informational item, so when do you expect this to come back?
After the Davenport plan, so about maybe another 7 to 8 months.
Mr. Montgomery?
I know that particularly when we're looking at the park, the activity on the green, I'm not sure if we've already, additional conversation has been had, but I know there's some specific things associated with that park and the area that they're interested in working with the city with, and I'd be interested to see if there are items that are germane specifically to that area associated with the park that are not going to be impacted by this study, that we can go ahead and kind of take a look at how some of those things could potentially work.
We are looking at those sidewalks specifically as one of the things that, other than the bulb outs, as Ms. McCullough indicated, we are comfortable that we can work with them on the sidewalks.
Okay.
All right. Okay, thank you. Let's go then to item G1, please.
Presentation on traffic calming policy, procedures, locations, et cetera.
All right, thanks. I had asked for this review. There's background material in the packet. One of the things that I'd like, Ms. Pella, if you can go over verbally, sort of a review of some of the alternative measures that are available in our toolbox of traffic calming procedures and what they do and where they're appropriate for consideration.
Okay. So you don't want me to go through any of the background information, just the
I think the process is fairly well known. It's the alternatives that don't get looked at that I'm particularly interested in having just a sort of a review briefing, because it's been a few years since we looked at the kinds of tools that are available outside of the first thing that everybody always asks for, which is speed bumps.
Right.
So what else do we have, and how can it be used?
On the second page of this item, there's a full list of some of the, from our traffic calming policy, some of the other tools that are available. And they're broken down into 4 different categories: non-physical, vertical, horizontal, and diversion. The non-physical measures would be measures that physically do not require any construction to the roadway. There are measures such as, and some are outside of our area, like speed enforcement. That would be where we would call in law enforcement to help enforce the speed. So some of the others are radar trailers, line striping, signage, pavement marking, legends, high visibility crosswalks, on-street parking, raised pavement markings, streetscaping, multi-way stops where they're warranted, gateways and entryways, colored pavements, and turn prohibitions and other restrictions. So when you think of these measures, you would think of these measures that you would introduce to the roadway to give the visible impact, or things like signage of warning signs and things of that nature. Center lines or parking on the street would give the visibility of narrowing the roadway. So those are the non-physical measures that could be introduced. Going down to your vertical measures, these provide changes in the pavement height and materials, and they specifically may cause discomfort to the driver and their passengers whenever they're driving in excess of the desired speed. Those are the measures that you probably see more frequently, such as the speed humps, the speed lumps, and the speed tables. Some other things to consider would be textured pavements, raised crosswalks, and raised intersections. Textured pavements you've probably experienced maybe on the highways whenever you may veer off the road onto the shoulders, and you may have like maybe that change in pavement to kind of wake you up. Raised crosswalks and raised intersections would be other items that are available that in our toolbox that we've introduced to neighborhoods that maybe they haven't considered.
What's the difference between a raised crosswalk or a raised intersection and a speed hump?
They're pretty much about the same, except maybe they're a little bit wider width, but they would have the same impact.
Not really the same height, typically.
Not the same height, no.
Typically, the raised intersection and raised crosswalk is for the entire width of the intersection or the entire width of the crosswalk. So if the crosswalk is 10 feet wide, then the whole crosswalk area would be raised 6 inches or so over that entire 10-foot width. Then there would be tapers before and after. A speed hump or lump is typically going to be smaller.
My sense of those, where I've seen them employed on streets here, is that the humps are higher too than the raised crosswalk.
Because,
They may feel higher, but I'm not aware that they are, but we'll be happy to check and see. But
yeah, I think that 6 inches is about what we use, but because it's the wider width, they may be tapering off and seem a little smoother.
I would like more information on that because I've seen the raised crosswalks in situations where I know the fire department would scream bloody murder if there were a speed hump. And they don't feel as high when you drive. And I don't know whether that's simply a function of the tapers before and after or what. Go ahead, please.
The horizontal measures are measures which physically alter your travel path, or your lane widths, and your lane width path. So those are things such as your traffic circles, your roundabouts, curb extensions, chicanes, lateral shifts, medians, neck downs, realigned intersections, bulb outs, 2-lane chokers, 1-lane chokers, and center island narrowing. We've recommended these in some neighborhoods, but they haven't been accepted in any of the lists that we have here. But we've introduced them in some of our projects. Like we've got traffic circles on some of the roadways. One of the roadways just recently opening would be the Clementsville Road, which has a series of traffic circles or roundabouts. Curb extensions we've used. Chicanes, lateral shifts, your medians. These measures, if you think of them, they're a little bit more expensive. And as you look at some of the data, it does not always have the same overall effect depending on where they're used as far as the reduction in speed. So the benefit cost is really where these may lose out in the desire from the neighborhoods.
Ms. McIntosh?
What's a neck down?
A neck down would be where you would narrow the entrance to the roadway.
Okay. And 2-lane chokers and 1-lane chokers?
I don't know. I'd have to look at it.
long time, but I think a 2-lane choker is where you're leaving both lanes in place, but narrowing them, say, from 12 foot each to 10 foot or 9 foot each.
A chicane.
If you've ever seen a car being test driven on a automotive show, they put the cones out and weave the car through those cones. That's a chicane. That's the chicaning effect, and so you would generate a smaller, simpler version of that by adjusting the curb width to be wider on one side of the street for a certain portion and then wider, narrower on another portion, so the car actually has to weave as it goes down the road.
So you're taking away the kind of the straight shot temptation to ramp it up.
Correct.
Why haven't we seen more employment of those options?
I'm not sure. The neighborhoods traditionally haven't picked that option as a solution. I don't think I've ever seen one in Winston or in North Carolina for that matter, but I have seen them in magazines and catalogs indicating community satisfaction with them, but I don't know why they're not implemented here.
Mr. Montgomery?
In terms of the information we have here, do we present in those meetings that we have this kind of information in terms of what we've seen in other neighborhoods on the percent decrease and amount decrease based upon the method used in some other areas? Is that a part of the presentation at all?
What we present to the neighborhood, we actually look at the roadway conditions, and we try to present to the actual traffic calming task force the options that would work for that neighborhood, and then we allow them, based upon the information that we provide to them, the questions that they may ask, determine the one measure that they want to present to the full neighborhood.
Right.
But if you're referring to page 3 and the effectiveness information, that's something we just put together for this committee, so no, it hasn't been shared with us. neighborhoods as far as I'm aware.
No.
And then on top of that, in a sense, just in looking at it, because I know there's concern in terms of the different methods that are used in some neighborhoods and what's better. Just wondering if within that presentation, because the reason that most, I think, go with wanting to have the speed humps is because they believe that that's going to give them the greatest benefit to meet the need of their problem. But how can we show them and illustrate to them, whether it's, we're doing the presentation, how's that presentation done? Do we have any video that we can show with individuals going through these type of things? If they've never seen them before, then it's hard, even if they're looking at it from a picture perspective, it's hard for them to imagine actually having to slow through some of those things or how it's going to impact them. Everybody knows what it's like to go over a speed bump. So that's natural for people to believe that that's going to get them the end result. So I'm just wondering if there's some things we can do to enhance that presentation of sorts to help people, I don't know, experience it or see it in a different light than what we do now, to help them at least think of that as a real option rather than going what's familiar to them, which are speed bumps.
And I think that's what really, where people lean to, is what they're familiar with. So like you said, it's easy for us to, if they're considering speed humps or speed tables, to point them to a local neighborhood that has those available that they can actually experience. Whereas some of these other devices we don't have readily available, and maybe that's where we as a department need to be looking at other ways to present it, because the only information that we are presenting to them would be what's available in the traffic calming manual. So there are pictures there of each of the devices, but the real experience of riding over it or providing the feedback on the effectiveness of it, that's information we can pull together for them, but not that we hand to them.
I think that's a very good line of inquiry, because I think that's part of what's shaping the recommendations coming out, is people aren't really being effectively shown alternatives, and we need to do that, because otherwise we're just going to continue to get the same result and the same objection that I would anticipate would be less of concern to the public safety departments if we have alternatives. I note in the studies that you haven't studied any of the roundabouts or traffic circles that we have.
Right.
There's one on Westview that's been there for some time. There's a new one on Cherokee. Those could have been before and after studied if we had the data for them.
If you had before data.
Yeah.
Which would make
Right. And a part of it was a part of doing it as part of the traffic calming. So we looked specifically at the request that came in as a traffic calming process, and then looked at the before and after results of those. But we should pull that information.
I know, Cherokee, the traffic circle there was a traffic calming project. And so we should have had before data there and should be able to acquire.
And it's just gone in within the last 2 years?
Yes.
I was just curious, have we had any feedback, and one of these, the Millhaven is in my ward, where they basically put a median in that you have to kind of slow down to go around center.
And that's a 10 mile an hour decrease even in this data.
Have you had any feedback from any folks saying, boy, we wish we didn't have these? And maybe they need to address it maybe to council members.
I don't have that information where we've
I've
received
gotten
any of
some.
that feedback.
You have?
We'll put some in, and then we'll get calls the next week from folks who weren't particularly enamored with the device, whether it's a vertical device or whether it's a choker. I think I've had complaints on just about all of the ones that we put in.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember too the center island on First Street were examined at the time. That data should be somewhere in the records and showed a drop in the average speeds there.
That was before we had a policy, and that may be the only exception to getting complaints. I never got a complaint about that.
But that was kind of a pilot project for the concept and seemed to work. Mr. McIntosh.
I got a question about the voting process and the 70% required to enact one of these. Is there any science behind that, or is it just a number we
Yeah, it
picked
was a
up.
negotiated value discussed in committee. It was not scientifically based. It was what was felt to be reasonable in order to speed up the process of approval and yet be comfortable that people were strongly in favor of it in the community. There used to be a 60% requirement and additional meetings, and we reduced one of the meetings and increased the percentage to 70.
And there's also a question about how far you go. The most recent, speed pillows example, the only area you polled was that one long block of that street, not anybody on the neighborhood back behind. Doesn't really get at the entirety of the community. And of course, there would be extreme practical difficulties of polling everybody who could be affected, but that's especially the case when you've got a connector street that you're putting a vertical measure on. Right. Yeah. Anyway, other inquiries, other points. Thank you for preparing the background
I
material.
just say my limited experience, and we've just done a few of these in the West Ward, is everybody gets together and they all want something, but they don't want it in front of my house. Put the bulb out in front of his house because it'll mess up the parking in front of my house. So, again, my experience has been when it's all said and done, very little gets done because everyone wants it in someone else's front yard, not mine.
I remember when
Limited success.
I remember when the London Lane extensions first went in, I got a lot of complaints from people who didn't live in the neighborhood, who drove through the neighborhood and complained that they had to slow down
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, they said that's why they're there.
And it's interesting, the before speeds, except in the case of Millhaven Road, are much lower than the typical complaint. Typical complaint is there are people coming through here at 50 and 60 mile an hour. And, the data doesn't really typically support that. But the after speeds are substantially lower than the projected complaint level too.
My question about the threshold, the 70% thing, is that we're dealing with one right now on Robin Hood Road, and there's 160 people that have to say yes. Well, 70% of 166 people have to say yes to have this thing made happen, and yet there are just a couple of property owners that bear the brunt of the speeding. So while they're being impacted on a fairly regular basis, it's a major effort to get 70% of 160 people to say yes to something. So
Now, this is a neighborhood off of Robin Hood Road, not Robin Hood Road.
now it's Robin Hood Road,
Oh, okay.
basically from the children's home on Renolda up to Stratford.
Okay.
People travel high rate of speed. There's been a number of accidents. So,
Different project.
and I'm afraid that it's going to be very, very difficult to get enough people together, just because 166 people is a lot of people, and yet that problem is going to continue to exist. People are still going to crash in folks' front
Kicking
yards.
that curve when you go up.
Yeah, traffic actually goes up that hill faster than it comes down, which is pretty wild. So, I mean, that was what brought that question on. Hopefully, we'll get the votes together, but it'll be difficult. It takes a lot of work by the folks in the neighborhood to make it happen. Whereas it seems like it's kind of a public problem, not just a neighborhood problem.
What are the measures being reviewed there?
Everyone, everything on this list.
Any other questions or comments?
Chairman, I would say one thing we could do is work with TV 13 to put together some simulations or real video. Mr. Turner's got a new dash cam that we could also use so that the more we could help the neighborhoods actually visualize on video the different options. I think that would be a good idea.
Good point. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That is all we have on this evening's agenda. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, then the committee is adjourned. Thank you very much.